tie into free nature journaling field trips, which we take every month. At the end of the month, we go to a different natural area somewhere around the Bay Area and draw and sketch and observe and use journaling as a way to help us learn the natural history, what are the plants, the animals, the cycles of the seasons around this Bay Area. And interestingly enough, in the course of that, we also get better at drawing. But drawing is a really, really useful tool for that kind of observation. So my suggestion is to throw yourself into it, have some fun with it, but don't carry around a big inner critic, kind of going like, oh no, that's not a dipper, that doesn't look right, you know, and your inner critic can be so powerfully negative that it can really shut you down from drawing. The flip side of that, though, is that if you can just sort of sustain a way of gently looking at your work for feedback, finding the places where, what are the best parts of a sketch that you made, what is really working about it, what are the parts that aren't working as well. If you can just give yourself some gentle feedback, this process of improving at the skill gets better and better and better. There's a misunderstanding about what's called the 10,000 hour rule, right? The idea that if you practice a skill for 10,000 hours, you'll get mastery of it. If you are learning how to golf and you practice for 10,000 hours just sort of swinging wildly, you'll get really good at swinging wildly, right? So it's not just repeating something, but actually having a feedback loop. So that didn't work, oh, that did work, and really paying attention to those things. You gently pay attention to those things, you've got a feedback loop with that practice. And this skill will develop and blossom with remarkable speed. And it's a tremendous amount of fun. So welcome folks who are just with us for the first time. Today we're looking at shorebirds. Shorebirds are really fun to draw. And now's a great time to be doing it. The shorebird migration is in, so there are all these birds along the edges of the bay, hanging out in big groups. They're not hiding somewhere in a tree. If you start trying to draw by drawing a warbler, you know, these little birds that are hiding behind leaves, you can barely get a look at them. But the shorebirds will be like walking around out there in the middle of the mud flat, and they love taking naps, and so they'll just go to sleep, and they'll kind of get their shorebird thing on. So they're great subjects for drawing. And once you get down some of the basics of how their bodies are put together, you'll find that you can quickly kind of get something that feels like that shorebird. And so it's also a great place to then start to pay attention to how can I sort of show volume and shape. They are really, really fun subjects to draw. A lot of different species with some really wonderful subtleties. Just this little change in the shape of a bill can give you a tremendous amount of information about who you're looking at. You ready?
Yes.
Here we go. This is not working. We'll try that. That worked. Okay. So there are three basic ideas that I find really, really helpful for putting together any sketch. When I start a drawing, I am looking at what is this bird's posture, what are its proportions, and what are the angles on the edges of its body. If I can get those three things, the posture, proportions, and angles, I can get a basic silhouette of this critter that's very, very accurate. And once you've got the basic shape of something, it's easier to fill that thing in from there. So I'm going to define these three terms in terms of what that looks like in terms of shorebirds. All right? So when we're talking about posture for shorebirds, what I'm talking about is the angle that this bird's body, the major axis through the middle of its body, is. Now this is going to change as the bird is doing different activities. When it's resting, it'll have one posture. When it's feeding actively, it'll have another. And it's not necessarily a line from the tip of the bill to the tip of the tail, but you're generally looking at what is the axis through the middle of the core of this bird's body. And as this bird goes around about different behaviors, that's going to change. If you're making a sketch of a bird, and so when my drawings usually start with, I will put in a line that shows my bird's posture. I'm going to build the whole drawing on top of this line. And this ends up being a really, really powerful skill. You take that approach, the drawing that you get at the end will have the right posture of the bird. If you start instead by drawing the beak and then the eye and working your way down the neck and ending up at the toe, you can get parts of your drawing that have really good details, but the overall thing isn't going to feel like this bird. Right? It's not going to have that posture. If you start with the posture and construct the whole drawing over that line, you end up with a drawing that has the right posture. But also, let's say you draw this line and the bird flies away. Then what I do is I draw a little arrow to this and write, posture of a black-necked stilt feeding, whatever that is. This one line, you will already have recorded some significant data about this critter that you're looking at, just with this one first line.
Can you draw the posture?
Sure. So for this, just sort of initially hold your pencil up at sort of the what you sort of feel the axis of the angle that this body is. And I would be, if you've got something that is roughly like that, then we're sort of thinking about the same thing. That's posture. The second step is proportions. And this in shorebirds is a really, really big deal. By proportions, I mean how big is this thing's head relative to its body? What I've done here is taken a little sandpiper and blown it up to the size of a curlew. And so their body sizes are the same. When I take this little sandpiper and make it curlew size, notice the difference in how big their heads are. So if you were to draw a sandpiper with curlew proportions, or vice versa, it would not feel like that beastie. So just on this little slide here, just sort of take a look at this, sort of absorb the body size of this thing, kind of look at how big is its head compared to its body, right? And compare what you're seeing here with that. See that difference? There's a huge difference. So, but usually the place we notice proportion problems in a drawing is at the very end. You finally finish drawing the shoelace on the person, you realize you made their head too big. Right? That's because when you are in there focused on details, your brain can't see the big picture. It's actually different regions of your brain. So at the start, we're going to look at the big picture, the shape, the size of the head compared to the body. And usually the way that I'm doing this, I'm putting in some general posture, and then I'm building up the bird there, looking at how big is that head, and I can make this head smaller, I can make it larger. Right. That is how I build up my proportions. So I'm not looking at details here, I'm just looking at the oomph of the shape. The next step is the angles. And by this, we're going to turn our attention from the masses and how big they are to the actual shape of the... Oh, actually, one other last sort of thought on proportions. Exactly. Exactly. Somebody said, "Aw, right? Isn't that little critter cute? It's an adorable little critter." All right? Cuteness is a visual experience of proportions. Cuteness is all about proportions. Critters that have the proportions, big heads, big eyes, that babies have, we experience those as being cute. And so you can actually use this to your benefit when you are making a sketch of something. If your drawing looks too cute, you probably have a head that's too big. If it doesn't look cute enough, you need to make your head bigger. Right? So you can actually use cuteness as a yardstick for helping you figure out, is the degree of cuteness here the same as that? Oh, I find I usually, and most people usually make the head too big. Those parts of an object that attract our attention, like heads, faces, eyes, we tend to make those too big. We compensate for our interest by making it bigger on the page.
I think that's
Sure.
So, in terms of proportion on this one, would you also, like I'm looking at the relative length of the beak and the legs, just because otherwise I'd probably have too short a beak on that one and too long a legs. And I'm looking at it and thinking, my God, the beak is actually longer than the legs.
So on this little critter, that would be my proportions. Yes, for the length of the legs, what I usually do is I look at how far down here is the ground from that, and that helps me get my leg length. Right, so you're moving your ground up and down to get that leg length. And another very useful thing for thinking about bill length is to use the size of the head as a sort of a measurement tool. So this bill is roughly 1, 2, 3 heads long. And we're actually going to have a whole section on this, on legs and on bills, to help us deal with those. But that's the preview of coming attractions.
Thank you.
So the problem is, so these circles are great for blocking in your proportions. The problem is that our brains are really, really lazy. And what we tend to do is that now I'm going to draw the edges of my bird. Our brain does this little kind of snap to grid thing, where if I'm drawing the edges of my bird now, my brain will go like, oh look, I already have these edges here, and it starts following the edges of your proportion circles in order to draw the edges of the bird. But these circles are, and you get these drawings that kind of look like Frosty the Snowman, right? So Frosty here, this bird doesn't look like Frosty. There are corners on this bird. So that's where this next step of the angles comes in being really important. So by angles, what I'm looking at is not thinking of this thing as a rounded blob, but looking for where are there corners, and emphasizing those over these circles here. I have to fight against the over-roundedness that's going to snap to grid effect of having these little circles here. I need to look for where there are these corners. And what that does is, even on a chest of a bird here that is fairly rounded, notice that there are certain inflection points in this where most of the change in angle happens. If you just drew a curved circle around the chest of that bird, you would miss those inflection points. So instead of thinking, oh, it has a round ping pong ball head, you do that, you're going to get this full round head. If instead you think to yourself, where are the corners? Right? Where are the inflection points where most of that change in angle happens? You can get something that really looks like it gives you a sense of the angles of that critter that you're looking at. The circles are really seductive, and they will pull you into just sort of making everything these sort of blobby, over-rounded things. So you want to look for, instead of thinking this, oh, rounded chest, go, look, right there's an inflection point. Right there's an inflection point. Right? That is incredibly powerful. And things go from being just a rounded thing to things, this bird has corners. Right? So let's, kind of in answer to your question about sort of how does that look like when you're thinking of the length of the bill, and how does this fit together in drawing a bird? Let's kind of do a step-by-step walkthrough of how I might construct a drawing of a bird. This is not, by the way, the only way to do it. This is not the right way to do it. This is a way to do it. And what I recommend that you do is play with this approach. Consider it how it is different than or similar to the way that you do. Give it a try, play with it, absorb what is useful, and if there's part of this that works for you, make that part of your game. If there's an approach here that, that's really not for me, I like to do it this way, that's really good, right? So there's not, like, this is not a formula, this is the way you're supposed to do it. But I find that taking this approach, I'm going to make myself look at posture, proportions, and angles before getting to details. And It also gives me kind of a roadmap. So I sit down like, how do I even start on that? Oh, I know exactly how to start. All right? It makes the time from when you pick up your pencil to when you start to draw much more fluid and smooth. So the first thing that I do is I look at the bird's posture. So I say, oh, you're sort of sitting at an angle like that, and I draw that line on my piece of paper, lightly, very, very lightly. If I'm using a graphite pencil, just so lightly I can barely see the line that I have there. I also like to do a bunch of these lines. Does anybody have one of those non-photo blue pencils before? Oh, great. This is my #1 favorite drawing tool, the erasable non-photo blue pencil. And what is great about this is that it's an absolutely terrible colored pencil. You start to draw with this thing and it barely puts down any light blue. And that's why I love it. That's why this is such a great thing. And I go through tons of these pencils. I don't own stock in these things, but I really like these pencils. So the reason I'm suggesting this to you is because it really works for me. When I draw with this, I get this pale ghost image, right? If I have a non-photo blue pencil that's like a regular kind of colored pencil, non-photo, not the erasable kind. This, by the way, is the Prismacolor Kohl Erase non-photo blue pencil. Non-photo blue. So if I took a Xerox of something like this, or did a blueprint with it, this would not show up on that blueprint, right? But can I make a little sketch in somebody's notebook? Right here, okay. So see, check this out. Is it all right if I do right here? With this pencil, I'll come over here to get light on it. Oh, I guess then I've got a big shadow of my head. What's neat about this is that at the back of the room, can you see anything? And probably you folks over there, you don't see anything here. But check this out. When you are at sketcher distance, can you see that? Mm-hmm. Right? You can see this perfectly well. Right? So see how you can see that little ghost drawing right there? Mm-hmm. Perfectly well. Right? Well, can I borrow this one? Mm-hmm. So check this out. So just a comparison of colored pencils. See, like this colored pencil, great for making your skylight blue. This one, terrible for making your skylight blue. If I press hard with this thing, I get that. I press hard with this thing, same pressure, I get that. Right? So this one, great for making skies blue. This one, great for blocking in the basic shape of the critter. So what's neat then is that when I can put a whole bunch of these lines on my paper, and then when I borrow this from you, and can I borrow your pencil? When I then take a regular pencil and start drawing over this, what you find is that your eyes snap right to those graphite pencil lines, and you ignore the fact that there is that blue pencil in the background. So it's like all the guidelines, you can make all the guidelines for yourself in the world, and then when you start sketching along, it's like all those guidelines, you don't have to erase them. They somehow magically disappear from our attention. Our attention ignores that they're there. So for friends at home. Bird. All right, so I start with the posture. And over this, I'm going to place an oval representing the body of the bird. And a smaller one for its head. And I'm trying to look at how big is this head relative to this body. At this point, what I want to do is really take a look, and I know, for instance, that I have a tendency to make my heads too big. So I look, did I do that again? Did I make my head too big on my little curlew here? And I go, oops, yes I did. I also tend to draw them often too far forward. And so I double check, right? This is with that non-photo blue pencil, I don't have to erase anything. I'm just drawing a smaller head a little bit further back. So at this stage, the drawing's completely plastic. You are not wedded to any of the marks that you have put down. So I've done posture and proportions, and now let's also start talking about the bill. Things like this. At this point, I'll often like to put in a bill. If you're looking at a curlew, a long-billed curlew, what happens is your brain will look at that bill and go, oh wow, look at that cool, long, downward curved bill. And so you start drawing this thing, and here's my bird head, and you go like this. Right? Right? You get these things with like this huge, huge, super curved long beak. They have very long beaks. But what will happen is, because it's a cool beak, your brain will exaggerate the degree of curve, and you'll get these super curved beaks on your birds. So what I'll often do is start just by making a straight line out to where the bird is, noticing how far down that straight line does the curve really start, and then kind of show an inflection down from that. This is a great way to get past this. Your brain's going to want to just kind of go, whoa, right, and draw this sort of, honey creeper style hook on the front of this thing's face. I'm looking at how big is my head relative to that bill. Also a proportionate thing. Now the angles. This is the fun stage where your drawing is going to start to really look like the bird that's in front of you. I'm going to fight these circles by looking for where are the corners on this bird. Where do these lines really have their inflection points? And one very powerful way of doing this is to look at what artists call the negative space. That is, instead of looking at the head and the neck of the bird, I'm going to look at the shape of the air behind its head. I'm going to look at the shape of the air in front of its throat. Right? So this and this, these are negative shapes. When you're drawing the neck of the actual bird, there's so much detail there that your brain locks onto that and can't pay attention to the big picture. If you get your brain to instead look at the simpler shape, what is the shape of the blue water there, you'll see the shape, and you copy down that shape. If you're drawing the neck, it's easy to kind of get into the zone where you go, I think I know the way that bird necks look, and you're going to draw your idea of how bird necks look. As opposed to when you're doing this shape thing, then you are really seeing what is this shape. You're sort of seeing it for its own sake. So looking at a negative space is an extremely powerful drawing trick. I'm now going to put some legs on my friend here. This one is standing in water, so I can't see its legs all the way down. But I notice where